Now we read in verse 4 of chapter 9, "And the Lord said unto him, Go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry, for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof." Now, throughout the Holy Scriptures, we read of a mark being placed or set upon an individual or on numerous individuals. For instance, we have recorded by the Holy Spirit, who is the author, and as he moved men to write, we read in Genesis chapter 4 of a certain individual by the name of Cain, who brought about the murder of the first Christian martyr by slaying his own brother Abel. And we have recorded there by the Spirit of God in Genesis chapter 4, verse 15, "And the Lord said unto him, Therefore whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold, and the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him." He was marked as the man who murdered his brother. Here in Ezekiel chapter 9, we are given an undisclosed number of people, of individuals, as being marked out. Furthermore, in the book of the Revelation of Jesus Christ, in Revelation chapter 13, we have disclosed there and read of the mark of the beast and those that worship the beast, that is the Antichrist, as ordered by the dragon. In verses 15 to 17, we read in chapter 13 of Revelation, verses 15 to 17, "And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name." And certainly in these occasions I've saw it. Briefly, in my introductory remarks to underline, they all have something in common. They all have something in common. There's a distinguishing mark in the midst of a spirit of Antichrist. A distinguishing mark in the midst of the spirit of Antichrist. How do we know this? Well, Cain, he set forth a spirit of Antichrist as he rejected the bloody sacrifice. He rejected that sacrifice, that bloody sacrifice, and sought to accumulate or manufacture a gospel of his own understanding, which was no gospel. And therefore he rejected the bloody sacrifice for a bloodless one. Therefore rejecting the gospel, and consequently rejecting the Christ of the gospel, even there in those early pages of the Holy Scriptures. A similar situation prevailed in Ezekiel chapter 9. And of course, Revelation chapter 13, we have the Antichrist and the climax of hell's attempts to govern the world. But another similarity is that on these occasions, the mark identifies certain people and preserves them until the day of God's wrath. You see, Cain was identified, as are the followers of the beast, the Antichrist, and here in Ezekiel, it is the absence of the mark on certain people which identifies them as candidates for destruction, leaving those who are marked safe in the day of God's approaching wrath. Let's read it again, verse 4. And the Lord said unto him, Go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh, and that cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. And therefore it is with those who are marked in Ezekiel that I want us to consider simply this Lord's Day afternoon. To consider with God's help, because there's a distinguishing mark set forth. A mark of spiritual concern. A mark of spiritual concern. You see, Ezekiel has been taken and he has been carried into exile. And as he sits in the house with the elders of Jerusalem, or Israel rather, gathered around him, the Spirit of God brings him to view in the preceding chapter, chapter 8, the wickedness of Jerusalem. He brings him to view, to see the wickedness of Jerusalem in chapter 8. And the nation, and in chapter 9, of which we've read, he's caused to view and see of the coming and approaching destruction. However, the inhabitants are not all gone astray. Not all have departed. Not all have turned away. As verse 4 states clearly, there has remained a faithful people. A people who were faithful to the faith and spared in the holocaust of death, which comes so suddenly. And I want us to, first of all, consider something of their circumstances. Their circumstances. Now, to find the true extent of their circumstances, it would be essential for us to see verse 4 within its context. To see the text within its context and reading the preceding chapter. And I want you to do this, even in the confinements of your own home with your own families. To read chapter 8 in your own time, but I want to bring the main points to the forefront for our understanding. Because back in verse 5 of chapter 8, remember the context of verse 4, chapter 9. In verse 5 of chapter 8 we read, Then said he unto me, Son of man, lift up thine eyes now the way toward the north. So I lifted up mine eyes the way toward the north, and behold, northward at the gate of the altar, this image of jealousy in the entry. At the gate of the altar, this image of jealousy in the entry. Immediately we see that there's no sin offering. There is no sin offering upon the altar. There's an absence of the blood at the altar. There's no priest standing to receive and offer an offering for the covering of sin as decreed and laid out by the law. And so what do we see? We see at the gate, at the entry, an image of jealousy. There's nothing but idolatry. Idolatry in the house. Nothing but idolatry, an image of jealousy in the entry. The latter part of verse 6 states, "But turn thee yet again, and thou shalt see greater abominations." Look further at verse 7. "And he brought me to the door of the court. And when I looked, behold, a hole in the wall." Verse 8. "Then said he unto me, Son of man, dig now in the wall. And when I had digged in the wall, behold, a door." Verse 9. "And he said unto me, Go in, and behold the wicked abominations," plural, abominations, "that they do here." And now he's caused to see the greater abominations, as referred to in verse 6, verse 10. "So I went in and saw, and behold, every form of creeping things, and abominable beasts, and all the idols of the house of Israel portrayed upon the wall round about." Portrayed upon the wall round about. Verse 11. "And there stood before them 70 men of the ancients of the house of Israel, and in the midst of them stood Jaazaniah, the son of Shaphan, with every man his censer in his hand, and a thick cloud of incense went up." Verse 12. "Then said he unto me, Son of man, hast thou seen what the ancients of the house of Israel do in dark? Every man in the chambers of his imagery, for they say, The Lord seeth us not. The Lord hath forsaken the earth." Here is the circumstances. Oh, these men, they had formed the opinion that they were hid away in secrecy of all that they had done in darkness. They thought that they were hid away in secrecy and in the dark chambers of their imagination, and they had concluded, they had thought in their own minds, proceeding from their own hearts, that God didn't see them. They had concluded that God didn't see. They had thought within themselves that in the darkness of their idolatry, they excused their behavior by deceiving their own hearts into believing that God had somehow retired and resigned his rule in the earth. "The Lord seeth us not. The Lord hath forsaken the earth." Oh, how blind and deceived and mistaken they really were. And such was the great abominations in the Lord's house. In the Lord's house. Verse 14 reveals women weeping for Tammuz. And Tammuz was a dead god, a dead god. And what Ezekiel was being shown by God was that many people they were no longer worshiping the true and living God. There was ritual. There was religion. But nothing of redemption. The bloody sacrifice, no longer there. An image of jealousy, right in the entry. And all these greater abominations, and the worshipping of dead gods. And Ezekiel was being shown by God that many people were no longer worshipping the true and living God. And surely we see and we are being shown something of the depth and extent of the spiritual darkness which existed in the holy city. And verse 15 furthermore reveals greater abominations than these. Greater abominations than these. Verse 16, there was about 25 men with their backs toward the temple of the Lord and their faces toward the east, and they worshipped the sun, S-U-N. They worshipped the sun, S-U-N, toward the east. They had turned their back on the altar. That is, the altar of sacrifice, and on the altar of incense, and upon the mercy seat to practice their abominations. They had turned from serving the true and living God. And it was an apostasy, a departure from worshiping the true and living God. And Ezekiel is being shown this of all that is taking place in and around the temple. And all was a representation of the whole of the nation and how the nation was behaving. You see, the general state of the nation, their idolatry, of their rebellion, and their provoking of the sovereign God of all the earth. And yet, chapter 9 makes it clear that in the midst of all the rebellion, of all the apostasy, of all the departure and idolatry, in the midst of it all, when it appeared from the general attitude and behavior of the nation, from the high priest right down to the common people, yet there remained in the midst of all the calamitous circumstances a faithful remnant who served the true and living God. In the midst of all the calamitous sight, there remained the faithful remnant who served the true and living God, as verse 4 reveals further their commitment. Not only their circumstances, but their commitment. Because verse 4, it states, the men that sigh and that cry. The men that sigh and that cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. Oh, their commitment was determined by their sensitivity and sorrow over their nation's sin. Their sensitivity and sorrow over their nation's sin. It says that sigh and that cry. Those two words were describing and are describing for us the emotions filling these men. Also reveals their behavior in their circumstances, as the two words describe two different aspects of their attitude. The men that sigh gives the picture of a very secret expression. That sigh, because a sigh is a very personal groan. A personal groan, a deep grief within the soul and sorrow of heart. Now remember how that the Israelites had groaned under the Egyptians. In Exodus chapter 1 and the verses 13 to 14 where we read, "And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor. And they made their lives better with hard bondage, in mortar and in brick, and in all manner of service in the field. All their service wherein they made them serve was with rigor." And then over in Exodus chapter 3, verses 7 to 8, we read, "And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people which are in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows, and I am come down to deliver them." It was the bitterness of their lives. It wasn't their affliction that brought God down. It was something else. "For I know their sorrows." For I know their sorrows. Those sighs were the internal, the mental emotions which arose from their circumstances. And dear believer, you and I, dear saved sinner, redeemed by precious blood, you and I can be grieved in our very soul by reason of our circumstances, whatever they may be, yet we can meet them head on because we see their commitment, because their sighs were turned into cries. Their sighs were turned into cries. And God is well aware of our sighs, brethren and sisters. But it was their cries which moved God to act. Oh, you sigh, no doubt, over the need of an under-shepherd. But brethren and sisters, you need to cry. You need to cry. The men that sigh and that cry. God is well aware of our sighs, brethren and sisters, but in this case, as it is in many cases, it was their cries which moved God to act, that caused God to intervene. And surely we truly sigh over the state of our nation. Surely we truly sigh over the state of our denomination. The need of gospel preachers to be raised up. Oh, you think on it, do you not sigh? In the next 3 years, there'll be 22 retirements approximately. And therefore there's a need for us to cry. Pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest, that he will send forth laborers into his harvest. The Lord has given us the very cries to cry. The very cries to cry. And therefore take your sighs to the cry room. And I'm not meaning where the children need to go, but where the children of God need to go. To the public prayer meetings, to the seasons before the services, to lay hold on God, to pray for preachers, to pray for men of spiritual backbone, men who be faithful to the blood and to the book, and will do as God commands them to do, and preach what God gives them to preach. Oh, this is the need of the hour. Oh, surely we sigh over the state of our nation and province, over the state of affairs, and yet there must be a crying. The men that sigh and that cry, a mark of spiritual concern. Oh, friend, if you have no concern for the souls of men, women, boys and girls outside of Jesus Christ, friend, I would be concerned for your soul. If there's no concern for those who are dead in trespasses and in sins, those who are not fit to die, safe to die. I would be concerned for your soul, for your soul. Oh, the men that sigh and that cry. They cried over the state of the nation. They cried over the desecration of the temple. They cried over the depravity of man, the darkness and deadness of religion. They cried over the departure from the way of truth. And they brought their circumstances and their deep concerns to God and committed unto Him and prayed for His intervention. And dear brethren and sisters, nothing else will do. The need for God's divine intervention, bringing the case to the throne of grace, bringing your case to the throne of grace. Oh, God's divine intervention, it meant terrible judgment. It meant the destroying of all that they held dear. But they cried fervently to God to revive their land and nation. It took time, but God did move, and the evil rulers and politicians and religious leaders who had damned the nation were removed as the goodness of God triumphed over evil. And therefore, what encouragement, no matter what the circumstances, dear brethren and sisters in Christ, God has not changed. Jesus Christ, the same yesterday, today, and forever. He's unchanging in His unchangeableness. He cannot change. Jehovah changeth not. And God hasn't changed. He's not blind. He's not deaf to our cry. His eyes are over the righteous. His ears are open unto their cry. And His face is against them that do evil. He has not abdicated His throne. And provided that faithful men and women, young people, concerned over the circumstances, the state of the nation, pray on and cry on, for God will answer, God will judge evil, and revival blessings will come, because when God punishes sin, He won't forget His promise to preserve His people. To preserve His people. Luke's Gospel, chapter 18, and the first 7. And shall not God avenge His own elect? Will is a promise. And shall not God avenge His own elect, which cry day and night unto Him, though He bear long with them? Oh, dear brother, sister in Christ, let us give Him no rest. And keep not silence. As you sigh, turn those sighs to cries. Lay hold on God. Be at the public prayer meeting, asking God to intervene, to save the lost, to bless the preaching in the evening season, in the morning season, in the afternoon, within your home, within your family, within and around your neighborhood, your neighbors, your relatives, and that sinners will be gloriously saved, brought into the family and fold of God, as sighing and crying over our nation, over the abominations of our denomination. May the Lord bless these few thoughts for His own name's sake. We'll turn in closing